The quilt on my grandmother's bed was made from old dress fabric pieces of her mother's church clothes, her sister's prom dress, a strip of yellow gingham from a kitchen curtain that hung in a house that no longer existed. She had told me the story behind every square. My sister never asked. My grandmother passed on a Tuesday in November. She had been declining for about 8 months, slowly and then all at once, the way those things go. I had taken the week off work to be with her at the end. I held her hand. I was there when her breathing changed and when it stopped. My sister sent flowers. I want to be fair about my sister. She is not a cartoon villain. She has a laugh that fills up a room, and when she is present, she is genuinely present, warm and funny, and the kind of person strangers talk to in grocery store lines. The problem has never been who she is in a good moment. The problem has always been what she does when something is at stake. Our grandmother raised us. That is the part you need to understand first. Our mother left when I was 6, and my sister was 9. Not dramatically, not all at once, just gradually less, and then gone. Our father had been gone before that. Our grandmother, who was 61 years old at the time and had been looking forward to quiet mornings and crossword puzzles and a garden she didn't have to share, took us in without hesitation. She fed us and drove us and sat in the second row at every school play and graduation. She taught me to make her mother's biscuit recipe from memory. She called us every Sunday for the rest of her life, even after we were grown, even after we had our own lives, every single Sunday at 10 in the morning. I am 32 years old. I work in estate planning. That is either a remarkable coincidence or a completely logical outcome, depending on how well you know me. I have spent the last 7 years helping families navigate exactly the kind of situation my grandmother's passing created. I knew what the documents said. I had helped her update them 3 years ago when her health first started to shift. I knew where everything was filed. My sister did not know that I knew all of this. That was her first mistake. The second mistake came about 6 weeks before my grandmother passed, when my sister started calling more frequently than she had in years. Not to ask about our grandmother's comfort or her pain levels or whether she needed anything. The questions were different. Was the savings account still at the same credit union? Had grandmother mentioned anything about the house recently? Did I know if she had spoken to an attorney in the last year or so? I answered carefully. I said I wasn't sure about most of it. I said grandmother seemed comfortable. I did not say what I was actually thinking, which was that I had heard these questions before, not from my sister specifically, but from clients. From the adult children who called my office with that particular mix of anxiety and entitlement, trying to figure out what was coming to them before the person they were supposedly calling about had even finished dying. I called my grandmother's attorney the next morning. We had a conversation. We made some adjustments. My grandmother passed on a Tuesday. The visitation was Thursday. The funeral was Friday morning. My sister arrived Thursday afternoon, which was later than she had said she would come. She hugged me at the door and cried, and the crying seemed real. I think it was real. Grief and greed are not mutually exclusive. I have seen that in my work too. She stayed at a hotel rather than the house, which I thought was strange but didn't question. My husband, who had driven down with me from Columbus, and who is the most even-tempered person I have ever known, noticed it too. He didn't say anything then. He had learned over the years that the time to say things was rarely immediately. The visitation went the way visitations go. People came and spoke softly and held my hands and said my grandmother's name and talked about her cooking. Her neighbor of 40 years brought a casserole. One of her old church friends brought the same apple walnut bread she had brought to every funeral in that congregation for 30 years. And I ate 2 pieces standing up in the church lobby because I hadn't eaten all day and it was something to do with my hands. My sister circulated. She was good at that. She spoke to everyone, remembered names, laughed at the right moments. I watched her the way you watch something you're not sure about, not with accusation, just with attention. That night, after the visitation, I went back to my grandmother's house alone. My husband offered to come. I told him I needed an hour by myself. I sat in her kitchen and drank a cup of tea from the same mug she had used every morning for as long as I could remember, the one with the faded blue stripe around the rim that had been washed so many times the stripe had worn thin in one spot. I sat there and I let myself miss her. Not the logistics of her death, not the paperwork, not the questions my sister had been asking. Just her. The way she said my name, the way she hummed to herself when she was reading. Then I went to the desk in the small room off the kitchen that she had always called the study, even though it was barely bigger than a closet, and I checked the accounts. My sister had attempted to add herself as a joint account holder to my grandmother's savings account 4 days earlier. The bank had flagged it. My grandmother's attorney had set that flag 6 weeks ago, after our phone call. I sat with that for a moment. I looked at my grandmother's handwriting on the notepad next to the phone. A grocery list she had never finished. the last few items trailing off mid-sentence. Eggs, butter, the good kind of. I took a photograph of that notepad. I don't know exactly why. It just seemed important to record what ordinary looked like. The funeral was Friday morning at 10. I got there early. My sister arrived with 7 minutes to spare, dressed beautifully, eyes already red. We sat together in the front row. I held her hand during the service because she is my sister, and our grandmother loved her, and whatever else was true, that was also true. The eulogy was given by our grandmother's pastor, who had known her for 35 years. He talked about her patience and her stubbornness, and how those were the same quality expressed in different directions. He talked about how she had made a family when a family needed making. He looked at us when he said that. I did not look at my sister. After the burial, there was a reception at the church hall. I stood in the receiving line for an hour and a half. I thanked people for coming. I accepted casseroles and pound cakes and a truly extraordinary amount of sympathy cards. My sister stood beside me for about 40 minutes, and then I noticed she wasn't there anymore. I found out later she had slipped out to take a phone call. I found out even later what the phone call was about. The attorney called me that evening. My sister had contacted his office that afternoon while I was still at the reception, while my grandmother's friends were still eating and sharing memories, while I was standing there accepting their condolences. She had called to ask about the timeline for distributing the estate and whether there was any flexibility in the terms of the will. The attorney, who had known my grandmother for over 2 decades, and who had a voice like a person who had heard everything and was not surprised by any of it, told her that the will was clear and that any questions about timelines should go through the estate process, which would take several months. She had then asked whether I was the executor. He told her yes. There was a pause, apparently, and then she thanked him and hung up. He called me 20 minutes later to let me know. My husband was in the kitchen when I got off the phone. He had made dinner, which I had not asked him to do and which I was more grateful for than I could explain. He looked at me and waited. He is good at waiting. I told him everything. Not in a crying way at that point, more in the flat, factual way you explain a work situation, which I suppose was how I was coping with it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "What do you need to do next?" That is the thing about him. He doesn't tell me how to feel. He asks what I need. I told him I needed to make a few calls in the morning, and I needed him to not let me do anything reactively tonight, and I needed to eat whatever he had made because I still hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. He put a plate in front of me. We ate dinner. We watched something forgettable on television. I went to sleep earlier than I had in years, and I slept completely through the night, which surprised me. The next morning, I called the attorney. Then I called my grandmother's financial advisor, who had also been alerted as part of the arrangements made 6 weeks ago. Then I called the credit union. I want to be precise about what my sister had been attempting, because vagueness is not useful here. My grandmother's estate included the house, a savings account with a little over $90,000, a small investment account, and the contents of the house, including several pieces of furniture that had been in the family for generations. The will left the majority to be split between the two of us, with some specific bequests to longtime friends and one to the church. Standard, careful, fair. What my sister had been trying to do, the joint account attempt, the calls to the attorney, the questions she had been asking for 6 weeks, was position herself to access liquid assets before the estate process ran its course, or to create enough confusion about intent that she might challenge the terms. She was not going to succeed. The documents were airtight, but she was going to try, and the trying was going to be expensive and exhausting and drawn out, and I think she was counting on me not wanting to fight, on me being, in the middle of grief, willing to accept a version of events that cost me less energy. She did not know about my work. I had never talked to her much about what I did, and she had never really asked. To her, I worked in finance stuff. She did not know that I had seen this exact pattern from the other side of the desk, many times, and that I had helped other families protect themselves from it. She did not know that 6 weeks ago, when her questions started, I had already begun doing for myself exactly what I would have advised a client to do. She flew home on Saturday morning. Before she left, she texted me that she thought we needed to have a real conversation about grandmother's estate soon, that she had some concerns, and that she hoped we could handle things as a family. I read that message in the driveway of my grandmother's house while my husband loaded the car. I looked at the front door of the house, the same door I had come through 1,000 times, the porch where my grandmother sat in the evenings, the hanging basket bracket where she put new flowers every May, which was empty now because it was November. I texted back, "I agree we should talk. I'll have the attorney's office set up a call." That was not what she was expecting. The formal estate process began the following week. The attorney's office sent my sister the documentation. The joint account attempt was on record. Her call to the attorney's office during the reception was on record. None of it was illegal. Technically aggressive and opportunistic, yes, but she had not actually taken anything. She had tried, and she had been blocked at every step by preparations that had been made before she ever started. At the attorney-facilitated call 3 weeks later, she was with a lawyer she had hired. I was on the call alone, which I think she interpreted as a weakness. Her attorney raised several questions about the will's execution and the timeline of certain account changes. My grandmother's attorney answered each one, clearly, completely, with documentation for every single point. There was a silence at the end of that portion of the call that lasted long enough to be uncomfortable. Her attorney said they would review and follow up. They never followed up. My sister called me 2 weeks after that. Not with her lawyer, just her. She called on a Sunday, which I don't think was intentional, but which struck me anyway, because Sunday was when my grandmother called. Always at 10, she cried. She said she had been in a bad place financially and had panicked and made terrible decisions. She said she knew how it looked. She said she was sorry. I believed her about the financial part. I believed she had panicked. I am not sure I believed the sorry was for what she thought it was for. I think she was sorry it hadn't worked, sorry she had been caught being the kind of person she had been trying not to be. But I also know that those kinds of sorry are still real. They just have limits. I said I appreciated her calling. I said I needed more time. I did not say that I forgave her, because I didn't know yet if I did, and I wasn't going to say something untrue to make a phone call easier. She said she understood. We have talked a few times since then. Carefully. The way you talk to someone you are trying to figure out whether to trust again. There are things we do not discuss. There are probably things she does not know that I know. I have decided that is fine for now. Some information doesn't need to be spoken to be held. The house took several months to settle through the estate. I went back twice to go through things properly. The second time I went alone, and I took the whole week. I went through every closet and every drawer. I found letters my grandmother had kept from when she was young, from people I had never heard of, in handwriting I didn't recognize. I found my first grade school photo tucked inside the cover of a book on her nightstand, which made me stand in that small room for a long time without moving. I kept the quilt. My sister didn't ask for it. I'm not sure she remembered the story behind it. It's folded at the foot of the bed in the guest room now. On cold mornings when I walk past the doorway, sometimes I stop and just look at it for a moment. The yellow gingham, the church dress fabric, the strip from a kitchen curtain in a house that doesn't exist anymore. My grandmother's hands had touched every one of those pieces, had sewn them together deliberately, choosing which piece went next to which. That is what she did with us, too. With 2 little girls whose parents had left, she sat down and made something deliberate, something that held. What surprised me, in the months after, was not the anger, though there was anger, and not the grief, though the grief was enormous and came in waves I still don't fully predict. What surprised me was how clear everything became, about who showed up, about what I was willing to protect, and what I was willing to let go, about the difference between a family you're born into and a family you choose to keep building. My grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she updated her will 3 years ago. She knew what she was doing when she put my name as executor. She had watched both of us become who we were, and she had made her assessment quietly, without drama, the way she did most things. I think about that when I'm at work, sitting across from a family, trying to figure out how to hold things together after a loss. I think about how the documents matter. They genuinely do, but what matters more is the long, quiet work of being someone people can count on, of showing up on Tuesdays and answering Sunday calls and asking the questions that actually need asking. That's what she left me. Not just the accounts and the furniture and the house, the understanding of how to make something hold. I'm still figuring out what to do with it.